do you remember Heath Ledger? The world saw him as the brilliant actor who became the Joker, a performance so haunting it redefined cinema. But behind the chaos and genius was a man unraveling, sleepless, isolated, and slipping deeper into a role that consumed him. Just months after filming ended, Heath was found dead in a New York apartment, surrounded by prescription bottles and unanswered questions. What truly happened to the man who became the Joker? Heath Andrew Ledger was born on April 4th, 1979, in Perth, Western Australia, a bright, sunlit city that seemed far removed from the darkness that would later define his most iconic role. His childhood, at first glance, appeared ordinary. Beaches, backyard cricket, long bike rides, and the warm chaos of growing up with an older sister, Kate, who became his closest companion. But beneath that simplicity was a family environment shaped by tension, divorce, and an emotional sensitivity that Heath carried like a second skin. His parents separated when he was 10. For most children, divorce is disruptive. For Heath, it was a fracture that never fully healed. He withdrew into himself, finding solitude in drawing, chess, and storytelling. He was a child who felt deeply, too deeply, and the instability at home amplified a lifelong restlessness that would later drive his artistry and also consume him. He showed early brilliance. At just 6, he played Peter Pan in a school play, and for the first time, the quiet boy stepped into a spotlight that felt strangely natural. The stage offered structure, identity, and escape, 3 things he craved. Teachers describe him as intensely imaginative, someone who disappeared into characters even before he understood what acting truly meant. But Heath's sensitivity also meant he absorbed the emotions around him. He internalized his parents' conflicts. He worried about disappointing people. He carried guilt he never should have carried. This profound emotional openness made him extraordinary as an actor and dangerously exposed as a human being. By his early teens, he was already rebelling against the narrow expectations of his environment. Perth was comfortable, predictable, safe. Heath was none of those things. He was restless, driven by a hunger to break free, to find a world big enough for the intensity he felt inside. He quit school at 16, not out of defiance, but out of certainty. Acting wasn't a dream. It was the only thing that made sense. With a backpack, a small amount of money, and a burning desire to become someone else, anyone else, he and his best friend Trevor DiCarlo drove across Australia to Sydney, chasing auditions and sleeping wherever they could. The journey was reckless, brave, and distinctly Heath, fueled by instinct more than logic, by passion more than planning. The early years were harsh. He faced rejection after rejection. Casting agents called him too intense, too emotional, too unpredictable. Ironically, those very qualities would one day make him unforgettable. But at 16, they were weights tied around his confidence. Heath responded the only way he knew how, by working harder. He trained relentlessly, studying performances, absorbing mannerisms, scribbling ideas and character sketches into notebooks he carried everywhere. Heath's relationship with his father, Kim, remained complicated. Kim respected his son's talent, but feared the instability of an acting career. Heath, desperate for approval yet determined to forge his own path, pushed himself harder than any teenager should. Their relationship was marked by distance and longing, 2 forces that shaped much of Heath's emotional landscape. By 17, he finally landed small roles in Australian TV shows. They weren't glamorous, but they were steps, slow, shaky, necessary. They gave him confidence. They gave him purpose. They showed him that the same emotional depth others found overwhelming could, in fact, be his greatest gift. But even then, Heath was haunted by an inner void, a feeling that no role, no praise, no success could completely fill. A feeling that would follow him to Hollywood, to The Patriot, to Brokeback Mountain, and eventually to the Joker. His childhood was not tragic, but it was formative, a landscape of quiet wounds, emotional oversensitivity, and unspoken fears. It created a boy who escaped into characters, and a man who would later lose himself in one. Heath's arrival in Sydney at 16 marked the beginning of a journey fueled entirely by instinct, hunger, and a kind of fearless optimism only youth can carry. The city was loud, fast, and overflowing with competition, a sharp contrast to the calm streets of Perth. Yet Heath entered it like a spark landing on dry grass. Every audition, every rejection, every sleepless night only strengthened his resolve. He wasn't simply chasing a dream. He was chasing a version of himself he believed existed somewhere on a stage or in front of a camera. His earliest roles came slowly. A commercial here, a bit part there, fragment of opportunities that barely paid the rent but fed his determination. Between auditions, he worked whatever jobs he could find. He slept on couches, borrowed money, shared cramped apartments with other struggling actors. And through it all, he carried a small black notebook filled with ideas. Sketches of characters, emotional notes, fragments of dialogue. Acting wasn't something he did. It was the way he processed the world. His breakthrough in Australia arrived with the TV series Sweat, 1996, where he played a gay cyclist, a bold role for a 17-year-old. Critics noticed him immediately, not because he was polished, but because he was raw, unpredictable, deeply alive on screen. Casting directors began whispering his name. Hollywood, always hungry for fresh faces, soon took interest. At 19, he landed his first American film, 10 Things I Hate About You, 1999. The movie was light, youthful, romantic, the opposite of the darkness that would later define his legacy. But even within that teen movie world, he stood out. His charisma wasn't manufactured. It pulsed from his bones. The studio expected a pretty face. What they got was an untamed presence, someone who transformed every scene simply by existing in it. But Hollywood's spotlight came with shadows. He disliked fame. He hated red carpets, interviews, stage smiles, the constant shaping of his image by people who barely knew him. Reporters called him brooding, difficult, intense, but they misunderstood what they were seeing. Heath was not aloof. He was overwhelmed. The noise, the cameras, the intrusion, all of it clashed with the sensitive, private child he had once been. He sought refuge in smaller films. In Two Hands, 1999, his Australian roots resurfaced, gritty, sincere, powerful. In The Patriot, 2000, he held his own beside Mel Gibson, delivering emotional beats beyond his age. By the time he starred in Brokeback Mountain, 2005, Heath had changed entirely. He had matured into an actor who didn't just portray characters. He absorbed them. But that transformation came with a cost. Heath's emotional process required total immersion. He didn't rehearse feelings. He lived them. Directors praised his commitment, but friends worried about the toll it took. After Monsters Ball 2001, he spoke about difficulty coming back out of the character. After Brokeback Mountain, he struggled with insomnia that lasted months. It wasn't method acting. It was something deeper, a blurring between himself and the people he played. Hollywood celebrated brilliance, but brilliance, in Heath's case, was a fragile state, one that demanded more from him than he could safely give. And when he accepted the role that would define his career, the Joker in The Dark Knight, no one could predict how far he would fall into the darkness he was about to create. By the early 2000s, Heath Ledger had become one of Hollywood's brightest rising stars, the kind of actor whose presence on screen carried an unspoken gravity. Casting directors described him as magnetic, dangerous, emotionally unpredictable in the best way. He wasn't polished like other leading men of his generation. He was raw, manufactured, a rare blend of vulnerability and intensity that made audiences lean in, unsure of what he would do next. Hollywood took notice quickly. After 10 Things I Hate About You, Heath was cast in bigger, more ambitious films. In The Patriot 2000, he delivered a performance that surprised critics, subtle, grounded, deeply felt. In A Knight's Tale 2001, he shouldered a major studio film for the first time, proving that he could anchor a blockbuster with both charm and emotional weight. His face began appearing on magazine covers. Talk shows wanted him. Studios wanted him. Directors wanted him. But Heath didn't want Hollywood. He wanted truth, the kind of emotional honesty rarely found in mainstream roles. And that desire pushed him away from predictable scripts and toward more challenging, dangerous territory. He sought characters who were broken, conflicted, misunderstood, roles that required him not to perform, but to reveal. Everything changed with Brokeback Mountain, 2005. As Ennis Delmar, Heath delivered one of the most haunting performances in modern cinema. His voice, tight, strangled, barely above a whisper. His posture, closed, rigid, as if holding in a lifetime of grief. Critics called it astonishing, career-defining, a revelation. He earned an Academy Award nomination, joined by a wave of acclaim that cemented him as one of the greatest actors of his generation. But while the public celebrated him, he privately felt exposed. He hated attention. He despised gossip columns describing his relationships. The world fixated on his romance with Michelle Williams after Brokeback Mountain, turning a deeply personal love story into tabloid fodder. And when their daughter, Matilda, was born, he felt a new kind of pressure to protect a family he adored, while trapped inside an industry that devoured privacy. His anxiety worsened. Paparazzi followed him relentlessly, shouting insults to provoke reactions. He grew restless, exhausted, increasingly frustrated with fame's suffocating spotlight. He once said, "I never wanted to be an actor for the attention. I wanted to disappear into the characters." But disappearing came with risks. Heath began choosing roles that demanded total emotional surrender. He approached characters with a level of psychological immersion that friends found alarming. He stopped treating acting as a craft and began treating it as a form of self-erasure, a way to escape himself and inhabit someone else fully. Then, in 2007, Christopher Nolan offered him the role that would change everything, the Joker in The Dark Knight. Hollywood was shocked by the casting choice. Fans protested. Critics doubted him. But Heath, driven by instinct, accepted. He locked himself in a London hotel room for weeks, filling notebooks with Joker's thoughts, handwriting, ramblings, and chaotic philosophy. He developed a voice, a chilling mix of menace and amusement. He found the walk, erratic, unpredictable. He built a character from the inside out, piece by terrifying piece. Nolan later said, "Heath didn't play the Joker, he became the Joker." On set, crew members described moments of brilliance, improvisation so sharp they stunned even seasoned actors. The interrogation scene with Christian Bale became legendary. Ledger's chilling laughter, his unflinching eye contact, his improvised taunts created one of the most unforgettable exchanges in film history. But beneath the brilliance, signs of trouble appeared. Heath's insomnia worsened. He relied on sleeping pills, prescription medications, and long hours alone to quiet his mind. Michelle Williams, now separated from him, expressed concern about how deeply he was sinking into the role. Friends noticed he was losing weight, struggling to relax, always restless. Still, Heath pushed forward. Still, he gave more. Still, he disappeared further into the character. By the time filming wrapped, Heath Ledger had delivered a performance so extraordinary it would redefine the Joker for an entire generation. But the price he paid for that transformation, mentally, emotionally, physically, was a cost no one understood until it was far too late. By the time Heath Ledger stepped into the role of the Joker, the lines between his work and his inner world had already begun to blur. He had always been a deeply emotional actor, someone who didn't simply portray characters, but absorbed them into his bloodstream. But the Joker was different, darker, more chaotic, more psychologically corrosive than anything he had ever attempted. And Heath, ever committed, opened the doors of his mind a little too wide. To prepare, he isolated himself in a London hotel room for weeks. The walls closed in. The lights stayed dim. He filled notebooks with the Joker's distorted thoughts. Fragments, scribbles, twisted philosophies. Jokes that weren't funny. Lines that made sense only in madness. It was a descent, slow but deliberate, into a fractured consciousness. He later admitted, "I couldn't stop thinking like him, even when I tried to sleep." But sleep rarely came. His insomnia, which had started years earlier, evolved into something far more dangerous. The role demanded emotional chaos. His mind delivered. He paced at night. He whispered lines into the dark. He experimented with voices, mannerisms, erratic movements. Crew members recalled seeing him between takes, staring at the ground, breathing heavily, as if Heath wasn't fully present, as if Joker hovered somewhere behind his eyes. He started taking sleeping pills to shut his mind down. At first, 1 pill, then 2, then prescription medications layered on top of each other. Nothing worked. His thoughts ran too fast, too wild, too loud. At times, he went days without proper rest. Michelle Williams, the mother of his daughter Matilda, saw the cracks forming even as she kept her distance. Their relationship had ended, but their connection had not. She worried. She warned him to slow down. She begged him to rest. But Heath couldn't, or maybe he wouldn't. The role demanded everything. And Heath had never been the kind of actor who knew how to give less than everything. When filming wrapped, something inside him had shifted. He told interviewers that he felt a dangerous energy lingering. He joked about the toll the Joker took on him, but the humor was thin, masking a heaviness he couldn't name. Those close to him noticed changes. The way he spoke, the way he moved, the way he seemed to detach from the world around him. He was physically present, but emotionally drifting. Then came the second storm, public pressure. The media had mocked him when he was first cast, calling him too handsome, too soft, too inexperienced. Heath saw the criticism. It stung deeper than he let on. And now, knowing the performance he had just delivered, he felt the weight of proving everyone wrong. He wanted validation, not for fame. He despised fame, but for meaning, for purpose, for the confirmation that the pain he poured into the role had been worth it. But as early footage of the Joker leaked online, something unexpected happened. The world snapped to attention. Fans were stunned. Critics who once mocked him now praise him. The hype grew at a rate Heath was not prepared for. Cameras returned. Paparazzi followed him relentlessly. Reporters shouted questions, many of them cruel, designed to provoke. Heath shrank deeper into himself. The pills increased. The sleepless nights stretched longer. He was working on the imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus when the cracks widened further. Those on set described him as brilliant but unfocused, alternating between bursts of creativity and moments of unsettling exhaustion. He coughed constantly. He looked pale, drained, pushed beyond what his body could sustain. One night, he told a colleague, "I'm so tired. I can't sleep. My mind won't stop." That wasn't metaphorical. Heath Ledger's mind, the same mind that allowed him to deliver extraordinary performances, had become his own tormentor. His sensitivity, once his greatest gift, now exposed him to emotional storms he could no longer weather. Doctor prescribed medications, multiple kinds, anxiety pills, painkillers for lingering injuries, stronger sleeping aids. Heath mixed them, not out of recklessness, but out of desperation. He wanted rest. He wanted silence. He wanted the intrusive thoughts to stop. But the cocktail he relied on was dangerous. Family members sensed something was wrong. Friends wanted to intervene, but didn't know how. Heath was not self-destructive. He was overwhelmed, drowning quietly under the weight of expectation, insomnia, heartbreak, and the aftershocks of the Joker. By January 2008, he was nearing collapse. His chest felt tight. His breathing became shallow. His anxiety spiked randomly without warning. He told friends he felt stuck inside his own head. He paced rooms at night. He lay awake staring at ceilings. He scribbled notes he couldn't remember writing the next morning. And through it all, he still tried to be a father, still tried to work, still tried to appear whole. But he was unraveling, not dramatically, not publicly, quietly, silently, in the private corners of hotel rooms and rented apartments, where no one could see the toll the Joker and life itself had extracted from him. His final weeks were a blur of exhaustion, medication, and isolation. The people around him could feel something approaching, something dark, something heavy, but no one imagined how close the breaking point truly was. Heath Ledger had created a masterpiece, but the masterpiece had taken more from him than anyone knew. And within days, the world would wake to a headline that would freeze Hollywood in disbelief and ignite years of speculation, grief, and unanswered questions. January 22nd, 2008 began like an ordinary winter morning in New York City. Cold air, gray skies, a quiet stillness hanging over Soho. In a fourth-floor loft on Broome Street, Heath Ledger lay in a bed he hadn't slept well in for weeks. Empty teacups set beside handwritten notes. Prescription bottles lined a nightstand. Scripts lay open across the floor. It was a room of a man trying desperately to quiet a mind that refused to rest. Heath had returned from a long day on the set of the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, Just days earlier, he was exhausted, coughing heavily, and unable to shake a persistent insomnia that had been tormenting him for months. He told reporters on his final press tour, "I'm taking sleeping pills, but even they barely work." What he didn't say was how many he was taking, or how many different prescriptions had accumulated in his system. In the days leading up to his death, those closest to him noticed a frightening shift. Heath was more anxious, more withdrawn, more haunted. He spoke about feeling stuck inside a fog he couldn't escape. He described nights where his thoughts raced until dawn, nights where he paced the apartment floor, nights where he sat awake with the Joker's voice still echoing faintly in his mind. But no one, not even he, understood how close he was to the edge. The final morning, on the morning of January 22nd, he spent time on the phone arranging plans for later that week. He spoke to his former partner, Michelle Williams, about their daughter Matilda. He confirmed an appointment with a masseuse. He scheduled a meeting with his assistants. His voice sounded tired, but nothing suggested he was in immediate danger. Around 12:30 p.m., the masseuse arrived at Heath's loft. She knocked. No response. She tried again, still nothing. Finally, using a key provided by Heath's assistant, she let herself in. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Scripts were scattered on the floor. A kettle sat cold on the stove. Heath's bedroom door was partially open. Inside, he lay face down on the bed, fully clothed, motionless. At first, she thought he was asleep. Heath was a notoriously deep sleeper when exhaustion finally overtook him. But something felt wrong. The stillness was unnatural. She touched his shoulder. No reaction. She shook him. Still nothing. Panic set in. She grabbed her phone and called Heath's friend and security aide, then dialed emergency services. For several minutes she attempted CPR, her voice trembling as she begged him to breathe. But Heath Ledger, one of the brightest actors of his generation, a father, a son, a man barely 28 years old, was already gone. By the time paramedics arrived, his skin was cold, his pupils fixed, his pulse absent. At 3:36 p.m., Heath Ledger was pronounced dead. Outside the building, news crews gathered within minutes. Word spread across the world at the speed of a spark hitting dry leaves. Fans stared at their televisions in disbelief. Hollywood froze. Directors, actors, critics, all stunned by the news none of them could comprehend. A rising legend had fallen, and no one had seen it coming. The autopsy and the questions that followed. The official autopsy report revealed the cause of death: acute intoxication due to combined effects of oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, and doxylamine. A lethal mixture of prescription painkillers, anti-anxiety medications, and sleep aids. Not a suicide, not an intentional overdose, but a tragic, accidental interaction. The consequence of a man trying to sleep, trying to breathe, trying to escape the relentless noise inside his head. Experts explained that Heath's insomnia, combined with chest infections and exhaustion, made him especially vulnerable. His body simply couldn't withstand the chemical cocktail he'd been using to cope. Still, the world searched for someone to blame. Some blamed the Joker, claiming the role pushed him too far. Some blamed Hollywood for its pressure. Some blamed the tabloid press. Some blamed the doctors who prescribed him multiple overlapping medications. But the truth was more complicated. He didn't want to die. He wanted rest, and miscalculated the cost of chasing it. The scene inside the apartment. Investigators found rolled up scripts, open journals, several prescription bottles, scattered notes, a laptop left on sleep mode, a rent invoice, Matilda's drawings pinned to the wall. It was not the room of a man preparing for death. It was the room of a man still trying to live, but losing his grip. One detective later said, "Everything about the room felt like a life interrupted." The world's reaction, the shock, was global. Vigils formed outside the Broome Street loft and in his hometown of Perth. Fans left letters, flowers, candles, photographs. Michelle Williams released a heartbreaking statement, calling Heath a man of endless spirit and promising their daughter would grow up knowing her father's heart. At the Dark Knight premiere later that summer, Christian Bale broke down in interviews. Christopher Nolan dedicated the film to Heath. Critics wrote that his performance as a Joker was so powerful it burns through the screen. Heath Ledger will win a posthumous Oscar the following year, but the victory was hollow. The celebration came without the man who earned it. A brilliant flame extinguished long before its time. The haunting truth. Heath didn't die because he wanted to. He died because he felt too much, slept too little, pushed too hard, cared too deeply, and carried wounds no one saw clearly enough to stop. And in the quiet of that Soho loft, surrounded by scripts, drawings, teacups, and the remnants of a life still unfolding, the world lost one of the rarest talents it had ever seen. When news of Heath Ledger's death spread, the world reacted with a kind of disbelief usually reserved for mythic tragedies. It felt impossible that someone so young, so talented, so incandescent on screen could simply vanish. Within hours, fans gathered across continents. Memorials formed in New York, Los Angeles, London, and Perth. Candles lined sidewalks. Letters filled fences. Strangers stood together in silence, mourning a man many felt they knew through the characters he brought to life. Hollywood grieved too, not with performative sadness often seen after celebrity death, but with genuine devastation. Heath was not a typical star. He was a rare one, respected, admired, and loved by nearly everyone who worked with him. Directors praised his fearlessness. Co-stars remembered his warmth. Crew members recalled his humility, how he treated everyone, from lead actors to assistants, with the same quiet kindness. But as the world mourned, something extraordinary began to unfold. Heath's final performance was about to become one of the most influential roles in modern cinema. White medium star The Dark Knight, and a legend born. When The Dark Knight premiered months after his death, audiences entered theaters expecting brilliance. What they saw instead was something greater, something transformative. Heath's Joker was unlike any previous interpretation. Chilling, unpredictable, magnetic, and terrifyingly alive. He wasn't a comic book villain. He was a psychological force, a reflection of chaos, pain, and fractured humanity. The performance swept through the industry like wildfire. Critics use words like historic, masterful, and transcendent. Interviews with cast members revealed that many scenes were improvised, that Heath's creative instincts frequently elevated the film beyond what was scripted. The interrogation room sequence became iconic. His pencil trick, his laugh, his posture, his voice, everything was meticulously crafted, yet felt disturbingly natural. And for the first time, the public understood the cost of such immersion. Reports surfaced about Heath's insomnia, about his isolation, about the notebooks filled with Joker's thoughts. Fans connected the dots, accurately or not, and the legend grew. Had the Joker consumed Heath Ledger? Whether true or exaggerated, one thing became clear. The world would never forget his final performance. White medium star, a posthumous Oscar, and a bittersweet victory. In 2009, Heath Ledger became one of the few actors in history to win an Academy Award posthumously. When his name was announced for Best Supporting Actor, the room erupted in applause, long, emotional, sustained. Accepting the Oscar on his behalf were his parents and his sister, who spoke of Heath's passion, his dedication, and his deep love for his daughter Matilda. It was a moment of triumph, but it was also a reminder of the void he left behind. The statue was later placed in trust of Matilda, a symbolic inheritance from a father she would grow up knowing mostly through stories, photos, and the characters he immortalized on screen. White medium star, the man behind the myth. As months turned into years, the world developed a clearer understanding of Heath Ledger beyond the roles he played. He was a dedicated father, a curious artist, a shy, gentle soul despite his intensity on screen. Someone who loved chess, photography, skateboarding, and quiet conversations more than fame or glamour. Friends described him as a beautiful contradiction, emotionally sensitive yet fiercely brave, private yet passionate, chaotic yet kind. His death sparked global conversations about mental health, insomnia, and the dangers of prescription medication. Many actors came forward, admitting they too struggled with the psychological consequences of deep immersion in roles. White medium star, a legacy that endures. Today, Heath's influence remains undeniable. Actors cite him as inspiration. Directors study his performances. Film schools teach his Joker as a masterclass in character creation. And fans from every corner of the world continue to revisit his films, finding new layers each time. Heath Ledger's legacy is not defined by his death, but by his life, his bravery in choosing difficult roles, his raw emotional honesty, his relentless commitment to truth in performance, and the unforgettable characters he left behind. He did not live long, but he lived intensely, and in doing so, he carved his name permanently into the history of cinema. Behind the intensity that audiences saw on screen, Heath Ledger's private life painted a softer, more intimate portrait, one rarely captured by photographers or described in headlines. For all his boldness as an actor, Heath was, at his core, a gentle and deeply sensitive soul. He valued silence over noise, authenticity over fame, and connection over attention. And nowhere was this more visible than in the way he loved the people closest to him. His relationship with Michelle Williams began quietly on the set of Brokeback Mountain. What started as a shared artistic connection soon became a whirlwind romance defined by warmth, laughter, and creative partnership. Friends said he seemed lighter during those years, grounded by a love that offered him refuge from the demands of Hollywood. When their daughter Matilda was born in 2005, everything changed. Heath became a father with the same intensity he brought to acting, but with a tenderness the world never saw. He spent hours drawing with her, playing, building toys, holding her close as she slept. He once told a friend, "When I look at Matilda, I feel like the world finally makes sense." She was his anchor, the quiet center of a life increasingly overwhelmed by noise. But fame complicated things. Paparazzi swarmed him relentlessly, shouting insults, flashing cameras in his face, shoving lenses toward Matilda when she was only a baby. Heath hated that. He hated the intrusion, the theft of innocence, the theft of privacy. It was one of the reasons his relationship with Michelle began to fracture, not because they stopped loving each other, but because their world became too loud, too bright, too unforgiving. By late 2007, they separated, a heartbreak that left both of them raw. Heath, who had always felt emotions intensely, struggled to navigate the loneliness that followed. He adored his daughter, but custody arrangements and physical distance weighed heavily on him. He traveled often for work. Nights in hotel rooms grew longer, darker, quieter. And the more isolated he felt, the more he drowned himself in work, in characters and scripts, in the chaotic art that both saved and broke him. Yet even amid the darkness, he carried a quiet kindness that touched everyone around him. Crew members recalled how he stayed late to help move equipment. Directors spoke of his humility. Neighbors in Brooklyn remembered seeing him skateboarding with children on the street, laughing freely, unguarded. Baristas in his favorite cafes said he never once acted like a star, always soft-spoken, always present. Heath was a contradiction, a man adored publicly yet isolated privately, a performer drawn to darkness yet radiating warmth in real life, a soul overflowing with creativity, but often overwhelmed by the weight of feeling. Those who knew him best said he possessed an almost childlike curiosity, always learning, reading, questioning, building. He disliked conformity. He distrusted superficiality. He longed for honesty, for depth, for a sense of belonging that fame could never provide. After his death, Michelle Williams said he had a fire inside him, and it lit up everything around him. It was a fire fueled by love, by art, by sensitivity, but also by vulnerability. In the end, Heath Ledger was not defined by his darkness. He was defined by the tenderness he gave, the compassion he carried, and the mark he left on every life he touched. When the world remembers Heath Ledger, it often remembers the brilliance first, the Joker, the intensity, the fearless choices. But behind every iconic performance was a person far more delicate than the characters he embodied, a quiet soul navigating emotions that ran deeper than most could understand. Heath's life was a portrait of contrasts, a man celebrated for his courage, yet quietly battling fear, a performer capable of summoning darkness, yet filled with gentleness in the moments no one filmed, a rising legend who carried vulnerabilities too heavy for a world that saw only his strength. He didn't chase fame. He chased truth. He didn't seek applause. He sought connection. And in doing so, he left behind a legacy not defined by the length of his life, but by the depth of his art. Heath Ledger taught us that talent often comes from tenderness, creativity from curiosity, and greatness from a willingness to feel more than others dare to. His tragedy was not that he died young, but that the world never got to see everything he still had to give. But even in his absence, the impact endures. His Joker reshaped cinema. His performances continue to move people. His story continues to remind us of the fragile humanity behind every shining figure. He lived intensely. He loved deeply. He felt powerfully. And somewhere between genius and vulnerability, Heath Ledger became unforgettable.